60 Minutes Rewind.
Autism is a developmental disorder that can affect how the brain processes information. People with autism have a spectrum of abilities and disabilities. Some are unable to speak or care for themselves, while others can live on their own and have unique skills like excellent memory or attention to detail. No matter where they are in the spectrum, many adults with autism have a difficult time finding a job. Even making it past our first interview can be challenging. But that may be starting to change. As we found out, more companies are discovering the potential of people with autism, and some are now actively recruiting for talent on the spectrum.
All right, and then just head on over here.
Doing a television interview can be nerve-wracking for anyone, but for people with autism, it's potentially overwhelming. The cameras, lights, microphones, not to mention having to shake hands with a stranger.
It's nice of you to be there.
But last winter, before the pandemic, 5 adults on the autism spectrum agreed to talk with us about their struggles finding work.
I was unemployed for 3 years. I just kept receiving one rejection after the other.
Eric Roland has a bachelor's degree in sociology.
How many jobs do you think you applied for?
Countless. I can't even count. About hundreds.
How did that feel to get so many rejections?
Well, I felt useless. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with life.
Brian Evans and Philip Mitchell were diagnosed with autism as young children. Sarah Kleitch and Brennan Novak not until high school.
How does being a person with autism make you different than a person who doesn't have autism? Do you see differences?
Oh yes, I do see differences from person to person. With me, for example, I'm good with numbers and I'm good with mathematics.
Differences in communication are pretty common from what I've seen, like especially with like nonverbal communication, like body language and stuff.
What would you like people to understand about autism?
Lack of or the ability to communicate doesn't equal intelligence.
Clearly they have talents and skills. We see
Dave Friedman hired Sarah and the 4 others at Autonomy Works, a tech firm he started in 2012 to proofread digital content and manage data for dozens of companies like Nike and Nissan. There are 32 adults on the spectrum here, now working from home due to COVID-19, including Friedman's 25-year-old son, Matt.
Let's try 700, see what we get.
Nothing beats sort of sitting in my office and looking over here and seeing Matt at work. And the job has really given him sort of a whole nother purpose in life.
Do you like the job?
Yeah. I like that it's a quiet office environment.
Do you remember getting your first paycheck?
June 22nd, 2015.
You remember the date? That's... Did you worry a lot about what would happen to Matt when he became an adult?
For a long time, we didn't. He's really talented with numbers, really good with detail. So we figured that there had to be jobs out there for him. What we found was horrifying. Like there are no jobs.
A child with autism reaching 18 or 21, and suddenly it's...
The cliff.
People have talked about a cliff,
yeah.
Or graduating to their parents' couch.
What ends up happening is they transition from a structured school setting into their parents' house with really very few prospects. Back in 2011, I was...
The idea for Autonomy Works came to Friedman when he was head of marketing at Sears. He oversaw hundreds of employees checking the accuracy of advertisements in newspapers.
And the thought occurred to me, Matt could do this. This appeals to exactly the kind of way that Matt thinks and processes information.
It's a lot of very small, detailed information.
Yeah, it seems like a small thing. It seems like 2124 versus 2924, but there's tens of thousands of dollars of costs that sit in that error.
Autonomy Works employees monitor more than 2,300 websites a month for accuracy and quality. Friedman says their extreme attention to detail has led to a 90% reduction in product and pricing errors, and they're so good at sustaining focus, productivity is up 30%.
I have a great memory. And so when I do a task once, I can usually produce it exactly the same way.
Do you get bored?
For me, I don't get bored at all doing our work.
Part of it is the repetition. I can get into like a rhythm with certain tasks.
You like the rhythm?
Yeah. If I was in a job that was constantly changing, it wouldn't fit me very well because like my mind would be all over the place.
Let's look over here and see which one.
Not all people with autism would be able to work in an office environment like this. The Centers for Disease Control estimates about a third of people on the spectrum have significant intellectual disabilities.
Autism is a spectrum. It impacts people in a wildly different array of ways, from people who are unable to feed themselves or care for themselves, all the way up to people where you would never even know that they were on the spectrum and can get through life without any sort of supports.
At Autonomy Works, employees can wear noise-canceling headphones and take breaks in a quiet room where lights are dimmed to reduce sensory overload. Friedman says the most important accommodation companies can make is to change the way they interview applicants on the spectrum.
For a person with autism, the first 15 or 30 seconds of an interaction are by far their worst. They're high anxiety about meeting a new person, trying to interpret interpersonal cues, trying to plan out a conversation to have with that person.
And those first 15 seconds, that's when the other person, a job interviewer, say, is making their first and lasting impression about somebody.
Exactly. Hiring managers just aren't taking the time to go past that first 30 seconds and understand the skills, the talents, and the capabilities that exist within those individuals.
There are complexities that are inherently inside of these very large data sets.
At the global accounting firm Ernst & Young, they've scrapped the traditional interview process for applicants with autism. They've replaced it with a series of problem-solving challenges.
And so if I can ask you all to come up.
Testing aptitude, creativity, and teamwork.
I think for this stuff you could put like, analysis.
In a demonstration last February in Chicago, before the pandemic required they work from home, 4 current Ernst & Young employees on the autism spectrum were given millions of lines of data to quickly analyze and explain how they'd present it to a client.
If we find that there are errors, we can loop back over to this step.
Ernst & Young has used this technique to hire dozens of employees with autism who work around the world in fields like artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and cybersecurity. Is this about corporate responsibility, doing the right thing, being altruistic?
Make no mistake about it, this is absolutely a business imperative, and it makes great sense from a business perspective.
Kelly Greer, Ernst & Young's U.S. chairwoman, says the employees they've hired have saved the company millions of dollars by looking at problems in a different way and creating algorithms to shortcut and automate processes.
That is one of the things every one of our clients is focused on right now. How do they use data differently to create competitive advantages or to stave off vulnerability? And it is a very, very rare skill set in high demand. There's still so many people on the spectrum that are underemployed or unemployed, and they've got this incredible talent that is going unused at the moment.
This is a place where we could bring autistic staff and interns.
Last year, Vanderbilt University opened the Fris Center for Autism and Innovation, a groundbreaking research center where scientists and others are developing tools and technology to transform the workplace for people on the autism spectrum.
What subject did you most enjoy in school?
They're creating computer-simulated job interviews,
Straight ahead.
specially designed driving challenges, and a block design test to help a company assess a potential employee's visual problem-solving abilities.
So people have done research on this for a few
Maitali
decades.
Kunda is a computer scientist at the Fris Center.
So this is a wearable eye tracker. Right here and here are 2 little tiny cameras, and they're actually facing inward, and they're recording your eyes.
The infrared cameras detect where your pupils are pointing.
You can start as soon as I turn the page, so... Okay.
Dan Berger, a data scientist at the center who's on the autism spectrum, volunteered to take the block design test to compare his visual problem-solving abilities with mine.
Great.
For 10 minutes, he assembled a series of increasingly complex block patterns.
And go?
Yes.
Next, it was my turn. Dan made it look easy. For me, it wasn't.
At this point, my head is hurting. Should it be hurting?
I completed the puzzles, but Dan did them faster and was more efficient. How can you tell? Look at the square on the right of your screen. Dan methodically placed the blocks left to right, line by line. And amazingly, he usually only had to look at the sample pattern once before placing a block.
Why am I not?
I wasn't organized at all. I placed blocks randomly and had to look back and forth 13 times at the sample pattern before figuring out how to place the last block.
My mind is a sieve, essentially. Like, I'm not holding on to any of that information, so I'm constantly having to refer back to the original, whereas Dan, he memorizes it.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So it's a completely different way of processing information or trying to solve problems.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Maitali Kunda hopes employers might use tests like this to more accurately assess the capabilities of people on the autism spectrum.
You know, you imagine like TSA baggage screening is something that's super visual, or when you're inspecting batteries coming off the line for quality control. So there's lots of different jobs that this is relevant for.
The story will continue after this.
In the model, we put things like...
Dan Berger's unique abilities caught the attention of Kayvon Stassen, an astrophysics professor at Vanderbilt. His son is on the autism spectrum, and Stassen helped start the Fris Center.
Why did you want Dan here at the center?
I brought him on board with my astrophysics research group originally because we were dealing with these massive amounts of data from space telescopes, and I needed help from someone who had Dan's unique talents to help us look for patterns in data.
So one of the skills that you have is looking at large amounts of information?
I think my greatest skill is I see things differently from other people.
This is a picture of the Seven Sisters.
Dan's challenge was to make sense of data from NASA's Kepler telescope. His solution? He built an interactive software program called Filtergraph.
Using Dan's software tool, we were just able to slice and dice the data, spin it around in different ways until something visually popped.
This is a range.
What popped was a breakthrough in astrophysics. Dan's Filtergraph produced a new way of judging the size and age of stars based on how vigorously they flicker in the night sky.
Dan may be too modest to tell you, but he is the inventor of record of this platform, and NASA has licensed it.
NASA is using Filtergraph that you invented?
Yes.
I mean, the brilliance that, Dan, that you have, that's going to become increasingly important. There's only going to be more and more data coming down the road.
And I feel like people who can understand the data, that's going to be more important.
There's a lot of people who are unemployed who are on the spectrum. Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, gosh. I feel like there are a lot of strengths to being on the spectrum. And I think imagination is a huge key trait.
So that's the kind of opportunity that
we found about 30 large companies actively seeking employees on the autism spectrum, including Microsoft, JP Morgan, and Ford. But there are still so many people with autism who are unemployed, and the numbers are growing. In the next decade, researchers at Drexel University estimate as many as 1.1 million Americans with autism will turn 18. Back at Autonomy Works outside Chicago, Brian, Sarah, Brennan, Philip, and Eric told us they hope more companies will start to recognize the untapped potential of people on the spectrum.
What does having a job mean to you?
For me, having a job is important because it provides me with much needed structure in my life.
Having a job is important to me because otherwise I would become very financially dependent on my parent, asking them, can you buy me this? Can you buy me that?
It's just been nice to be able to go home and talk to my parents about what I did during the day.
They must be very proud of you.
Yeah. They always say they're not surprised, so.